4, 6, and 6.
I'm not surprised.
Someone be playing games. So that's fun to me, huh?
That's me.
That's okay. Thank you, whoever had my phone. I appreciate it. I don't know. Someone's playing games.
When's the last time you saw it?
Yesterday. Someone took it. Well, you're all just down to $50 reward.
So you guys help me out if I leave my phone here and say,
How did he get it?
He left it on the ground yesterday at class. Yeah. When it came on, it was turned around on airplane mode. Yeah. And he not had it sensed in. But
I appreciate it, whoever found it.
And just kept it.
So someone had his phone and put it on the gym.
Yeah, and so right now she's like, oh, the phone is here. You can wait. That's nice.
I know who did it.
They should have kept it and then gotten the $50 reward. Oh my God, good. That would be bad.
okay. So this is actually a picture of Ms. Heidi's son-in-law and 3 of her grandkids. So after you've stolen AJ's phone, live together in peace, be understanding, love one another like members of the same family, be kind and tender. Amen. All right. Okay. Polar bear fighting against enamel growth. All right. So we're going to really think about the terminology so that you know what is happening with the tooth with these different problems, and that you would have the correct treatment and or medicament advice for the patient on these different things. Sorry, one more thing. I know that we're doing okay. Tricia tells me on the C's. Anybody else need C's? Order forms? Y'all have them?
I'll take one.
It's all coming. This is your shot at getting fundraisers, because I'm still not being successful at getting the bank account to get white strips and stuff yet. Yeah. If you guys need an envelope. Yeah, okay. So C's right now is all I got for you to get your 4 points. Oh, I have them, or Tricia has them. Envelopes?
Yeah.
She's good. All right, you're welcome. Okay, so we're going to think about these different etiologies, different conditions, be able to give the patient good advice. All right, so remember primary dentition, just primary teeth. Mixed dentition, 6 to 12 approximately, where things are coming out, other things are coming in. Oh my gosh, what tooth is this? What's our strategy for deciding which tooth this individual tooth is? If you can't tell very well.
Oh.
How old is the kiddo?
Oh, there's 11.
Counting, pick a tooth you're sure of and count. Like if you're at the canine.
5.
No, 5 no, bro.
There's 6-year molars on.
6. They're 6 incisors. They're already incisors.
Oh wait, I'm thinking, my bad. They're
7, 6 to 7,
Okay,
7 to 8. So I think like 6 or 7.
9.
So they have incisors in already? So 8 or 9?
But are they in on the top? I can't tell.
Erupted. So, but you're gonna, when you're looking at the kid in your chair, you're gonna think about their age. You know, start counting at a canine. Decide, you know, are these premolars? If they're not premolars, then primary molars, right? Just really pick yourself some landmarks that you know and go from there, so that you don't mistakenly think, gosh, this is a permanent molar. And when the 6-year molars come in, what's really common with parents? What is really common that happens with parents when the kid gets their 6-year permanent molars in? What do they think it is?
An earring.
Just another baby tooth, right? So you're going to make sure that the parents know this is a permanent tooth. We would like to keep this forever and ever. Sealants, all those good things. You do actually have to have this kid brush back there. At 6 years old, how good are they at brushing back there? Bad, right? So many of us have only decay in our first permanent molars because we weren't good at that. Okay, and then permanent dentition. Permanent dentition is just adult teeth when that last baby tooth is lost. So you have to look at the background. Kiddo here. Sorry, I can't remember the names of these grandchildren. They're so cute. That's why I left them in. All right. So, right, we've got still primary maxillary anteriors, permanents are coming in, right? So 6, 7 years old. All right. Hypoplasia. The enamel hypoplasia is a defect in the development of the enamel. It can be hereditary. It could be a systemic problem. It could be local. So hereditary would be, what would be a good example of hereditary? Okay, Jay, what's a good example of a hereditary cause for enamel hypoplasia?
A good cause for amelogenesis.
Amelogenesis imperfecta, right? Yay! Systemic. Fluorosis. How about a local cause? Do you guys remember from oral anatomy? What would be a local cause of enamel hypoplasia, potentially? Trauma. So my kid went into both my kids went into the coffee table at a certain point. It showed up on my daughter's teeth, on the permanent teeth. And then the appearance of these, we're going to think about, is this some disease process we're seeing, the mulberry molars and the notched or screwdriver result of congenital syphilis, Hutchinson's incisors? Is this a real typical amelogenesis imperfecta? Is it, gosh, I can tell this is fluorosis from the pattern of modeling? Or is it a local thing? So you're going to decide by looking at the teeth and see if there's a pattern, right? So with my kid, it was her centrals had just little white spots right on the facials of them. In this case, you can see something happen systemic with these teeth, and that's where the teeth were the line where the teeth were calcifying at the moment. So you can estimate at what age this happened in utero, right? So this kiddo was sick or mom was sick, and that's what happened, that you can just trace it bilaterally and across several teeth. You'll be able to tell what developmental stage. All right. Attrition, remember, is that this is tooth against tooth. So this can happen just from somebody grinding like crazy. I have had it be a patient who had full ceramic metal crowns, which are quite abrasive and hard compared to the teeth. So if they had a maxillary anterior bridge or crowns, then this is really common, that you start wearing off those teeth much faster. And so you're going to be able to see that it is some sort of occlusal pattern where they're bruxing. I had a patient who was also a bruxer, but also worked in the tile company that's off the freeway in Corona. Is that still there? Yeah. Right? And so he's working in a very dusty environment with all that tile grit. And oh my gosh, he had his teeth worn down to nubs. It was amazing. And trying to restore that is very challenging. He wanted his front teeth to look better. We're like, well, you don't really have any back teeth to hold these jaws apart, so how are we going to get crowns on the front teeth in there? So erosion then is what? What's going to cause this?
Soda.
Soda.
Lemon,
right? So it's a chemical process that is melting the teeth. It's melting the teeth. Right, so this is wearing away. This is actually melting. So this is a really common appearance to somebody who has an eating disorder. This is perimyelitis, And this is, they have been vomiting and the acidity from their stomach is wearing off the inside of their maxillary interior teeth. They'll also have a pattern on the molars especially, but where the occlusal looks all kind of rounded and polished over. So, can this happen with other things? Yes. If somebody's on really long-term chemotherapy and they're vomiting from that a lot, but that usually takes longer than that, and it's a pretty good assessment for this person has been purging. So we need to take care of that, get some good referrals going. Be this person's champion. All right. Abrasion. Like I say, this is going to be the wearing things out. Yes?
How would you address that?
That's a challenge. That is a really big challenge. So you're going to present it as, so take a look at this, and I'll take intraoral photos if necessary. And so I have a concern that you are having a history of a lot of vomiting in the past. Did you have any medical conditions? You know, you're just going to explore the health history with them. Say, you know, we also see this really characteristically with people who have some eating disorders. Do you have that in your history, or are you dealing with that currently? And approach it as, I need to be here to support you. Okay, so not judgy. Will people admit this? Hardly ever. But if you put it out there in a supportive way, they may. And you might be able to help intervene them by getting them referred to somebody appropriate. So that's a big challenge. Right? You just have to really approach it carefully and gently, because of course somebody who's doing this has got some issues, obviously big issues to deal with. It's a tough one. Mm-hmm. All right, so abrasion. So we had a periodontist here that used to call this toothpaste abuse. So in the past, we would have, toothpaste now are generally pretty non-abrasive. But in the past, there were whitening toothpaste that were extremely abrasive. And even if you're using something pretty non-abrasive, if you're using the big, you know, my classic cake decorating swoop of toothpaste, then this can be an issue. Somebody who's still using a hard toothbrush is definitely an issue. And so we're going to work on having them chill out. Please. Yes, I'm super excited. So the first thing is praise them. You are working really, really hard to keep your teeth clean. That's amazing. There's maybe, 2 microbes there, and this pocket right here is going to be a 0.5 millimeter deep, right? They're working really hard. Praise that, because woohoo! It's so easier to tone people down than to get them to boom up more, right? So we need to try to now do something atraumatic, which means I may have to step them down to an extra soft toothbrush and just be really, really gentle with whatever they're doing. So we're going to slow down their technique as well. Mm-hmm. So these people, I sometimes will actually do a little tiny circular scrub, because if they start doing the vibratory thing of modified bass, as soon as they start going back and forth, then they start going crazy again. So I may actually switch somebody like this over to little circles myself. Yes?
How about recommending the electrical brush?
So electric toothbrush is nice, especially one that has the sensor that goes, wait, danger, too hard.
Yeah, the light and the timer. So
and the timer, so they're not too long. Yep. All right, fractures. So obviously, if you can see it in the mouth, it's pretty easy. But we're also going to look at radiographs if this has happened, to be able to decide, have they actually injured the root of the tooth beyond where we can see. So, putting your thinking caps on, what do you think? How long ago did this fracture happen?
Not too long ago.
A while ago.
Oh, why do you say a while ago? Bone loss.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We had a patient come into the periodontist and, I have these loose teeth. Well, shortly became evident it was a few teeth in the anterior, and really she was kind of holding them in with her tongue at that point. It turned out that indeed she had been abused by a partner, and these teeth had been knocked loose, and to the point where she had some fractures, and we wound up just having to refer her for extractions on that. Another can of worms that perhaps you can, gently open up and get somebody referred. somewhere. Fortunately, she was taking care of herself, but she had finally gotten down to taking care of the teeth many months later. All right, you gotta know this. Cram it in your head. It's gotta happen. You just memorize. Okay, so what's the most common kind of caries that we're gonna see? Pit and fissures, right? Those little tiny pits and fissures that are so tiny you maybe can't get a toothbrush bristle in. Right, so when the parent is shaming the kid because you have these caries on your first molar and you are doing a bad job and you're a bad kid, stop that if you can, right? Okay, so mom, dad, these pits and fissures are so tiny that you really can't, you nor your kid can get the toothbrush bristles in there. It's the anatomy of the teeth. Hopefully you're going to have the conversation before the caries. We're going to get the sealants on. If the sealants did not happen, we're going to say, here's the thing. This is very challenging. It just happens with some teeth. But oh my gosh, we're going to be super motivated, get the toothbrush back there. We're going to use the fluoride, all the positive things, right? Class 2, broad molars, especially think about that's where most of the plaque is because people stink at flossing, right? And so that tends to be a really common place to get caries. Anterior teeth, less common because they're skinnier. Right? And they're in the front of your mouth, so you can reach them, and so people tend to be better at cleaning, and so these tend to be somewhat less common. Class 4, when you start involving the incisal edge, that's pretty scary. That's somebody who's pretty high caries risk, or has been neglected for a very long time, usually both. Class 5, now we're just talking smooth surface decay, like out there on the cheek side. How did that happen? Often somebody who's older and somebody who is really high risk because of xerostomia, but we also see this kind of thing only ginormous when we're talking somebody with meth mouth, right? So if they're either using drugs that are really drying them out or they are on medications that really dry them out, we got to be really careful with those folks. So that's 5. So 4 is the interproximal on the anteriors plus the incisal edge. Yes.
Chewing tobacco cause people who chew tobacco, do they have one over the other?
Chewing tobacco tends to be a little increased caries risk. In
general? Or?
In general.
Okay.
Class 6 is the cusp tips or incisal edges. So if somebody has been a bruxer and they wear off the cusp tips, then the enamel's worn away, the dentin is exposed, that can open them up to that. But if you're talking just that didn't happen, they just have tons of decay, then that's somebody who's super duper high risk, right? So class 6 would be just the little cusp tips.
How do you determine between a 2 and a 5?
So 2 is going to be interproximal surface and 5 is facial or lingual.
Oh, okay, got it.
Making sense? All right, and so I think of these as, to me, in my mind, that's kind of also the hierarchy of how common are they. That helps me remember them. Okay, so here we go. How did these guys start?
Sure. Abrasion?
Do you see abrasion?
Say how they start.
So this is actually root caries. They probably had some recession. They don't look like they're brushing too hard. I'd like them to stand a little closer to the toothbrush, actually. That's what my orthodontist would say to the kids. Stand a little closer to your toothbrush, honey. So this actually started as root caries. So now they have extended into class 5s as well. But anytime there's root exposure, we're just going to jump on that and start prevention, prevention, prevention. This is probably somebody who's pretty high risk. They're pretty ginormous, and so I'm worried about what all is happening interproximal on this patient too. All right, and let's see if Floyd Ferguson arrives. We're a little late on that. Let me go check on that.
You got any more instruments?
Yes. Let's see where we're at.
Whatever. Oh.
All right, so questions on any of the PowerPoint stuff?
Are we going over the charting in lab?
Oh, we're doing that next.
After today, like after we learn the charting stuff, we can do composite.
Yeah, you're going to turn the homework in, and then you can do the competency.
Okay, so we couldn't do the competency when tomorrow, but we can do the competency not
Next week. We'll get you the feedback from the homework.
My pen stopped working, bro. My pen? I don't know why it stopped working.
Maybe it's not even connected.
How do you say?
It has to be connected.
Oh,
All right.
Via Bluetooth.
by Bluetooth? Oh. I'll give it a shot.
And sometimes the battery dies.
Anybody else need an envelope for their C's candy order?
Where'd you get your
I
battery?
have some. If you need one, let me know.
I'll buy it up.
It's just they are.
So if you have family and friends, because did we scan this one, Tricia?
What's that?
Did we scan this order form and you sent it electronically?
I think I put it on Facebook, but I have
Okay.
some with me as well.
So if you have a loved one that doesn't live right here,
Yeah.
that you'll see at Easter, send that on by email.
What was that? What you
I
said?
say if you have family and friends that you'll see at Easter time that you need to have them order some candy, send the electronic version.
Get the certificate. You might be getting one tomorrow.
Or you can do a gift certificate, but if you sell them the fundraiser stuff, we make more money. But the percentage we get back.
Oh, you guys get more percentage back?
Yes. So these fundraiser guys, let me explain. So, see the eggs? We get a more of that back. The little bunny box, we get 50% back.
Oh.
Okay? The fundraiser eggs, I don't recall exactly what are. Let's see.
We get more money back from them than the people.
Yes. Way more. Awesome.
Oh, that would be good.
Come on down, Floyd. Do you want them lined up in box number, or do you care?
I can just walk around, you keep going.
Oh, that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, everybody swing around this way.
They don't need to be in boxing.
I'm just gonna sign them out. Come on down. So the peanut butter eggs.
Whoa.
So the peanut butter eggs, we get about 50% or 40% on. The chocolate butter eggs, the Bordeaux eggs. We get about 40% on the marshmallow and scotchmallow eggs.
Huh? Sorry.
And the little bunny hot box, we get 50%.
What about the gift cards?
The gift cards, we get like $1.75.
So no matter the amount,
The gift cards, we only get about $1.75.
If they put you on sleep, can you try to go off? Are you about to again? Or no? I have to get. I hope not.
Thank you.
So you're saying these you guys get more back for the eggs.
And
I know her.
Good, hurry up.
so anything that's holiday specific, we get more money back on.
Makes sense though.
Way more money back.
But I'm thinking
Yeah,
wait, for the junior year. This would count for the junior year.
oh, yeah.
You're good then. You're good.
Oh, yeah. I'll go grab it.
Okay.
Oh, I asked him. He said to just pick it up. Yeah.
So I remember
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, they're not coming in.
okay, yeah. See,
like,
I was missing all of them.
Yeah,
So,
Okay, at the end.
It's all right. For your fourth cassette. I'm gonna have to take it in the morning and leave and then come back.
Okay.
you're gonna get one? Well, I'm gonna sell this.
I don't know yet.
See if I can sell some holiday ones.
Oh, you go up.
I bought. Which one do we get the most money for again? These. Oh,
Okay.
oh yeah. All right. Which one?
Is this your first one? Oh, you had your brother?
But it's not even my first patient.
Real patient.
Like, yeah, like something like
Okay. Yeah.
This is for your fourth cassette, so you have one in each cassette. That's for your fourth cassette. You should have 4 of these now, one in each cassette.
Yeah. I brought my friend from high school. Right now? Okay. Let me.
Yes.
You should have them in stock. Just come in and supply and check. We're in dental supply. You know where that is? Across the street, yeah. And they have all that. I don't have about 1,500 parts memorized. Sorry. Any of them. Right across the old computer system.
Not a new one.
No, right here in this building. So this is 3 or 4 cassette. You should have one in each cassette. This is 3 or 4 cassette. You should have one in each
that final sharpening is your period I use them to sharpen the teeth.
Okay, so everybody has
Need a sword.
4 of these. One of them might be one of the triangular ones that's carbon steel.
You should have one in each cassette now.
So if you have one that's the carbon steel, that's longer, so it's very pointy, and in cross section it's triangular, that cannot be in a cassette. It will rust like mad. Take it out. Okay? You're going to set it aside. You can still use it, but you're going to have to sharpen only on sterile instruments. And then you'll put those back through. So this is the sharpening file that sharpens your files. Okay, so everybody now has all their sharpening files. One more second, Floyd. Everybody's happy. Everybody has sharpening files. All 4 of them. Okay. Does everybody have all the cotton pliers? Anybody not have cotton pliers? All 4 of them.
I have to look, but I think I'm missing one.
Everybody have all the sharpening stones? Anybody else missing sharpening stones? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Sharpening stones.
Not sharpening stones, but I need the mirror for my foot because I got kind of late. And then when I was putting the bands on, I realized I didn't have
The mirror head.
the mirror head. Yes.
Okay. I don't know how we're still missing that.
Got all check off this.
Right? Okay, and the neighbor's probes. Everybody has 4 neighbor's probes. No person. Neighbor's probes.
Different ones. 3 Euphrates and 1
It'd be from different companies. That's okay.
Okay, so Ariana's going to see you. Naveen's going to see you. Adrian's going to see you. It's now on you, gals. I'm done, right? No more. Okay.
We'll check off the checkoff list and double check it for you.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yep. All right. And Rachel.
What?
Rachel, you're all good with files, right? I had a separate note about you.
I'll double check. I don't want to say yet, but if I'm missing one, I'll.
Okay, here's the deal. Today, no today.
Yes.
Done with I'm not sure. No today. Talk to Floyd today. Then we're done.
Whatever I put on the note is what I have. Is what's
It says missing 2 files.
missing 2 files, so I'm still missing.
What kind of files?
The red hand.
The sharpening file.
Yes. So all.
We got 2, some people got 2 of them that aren't the red hand.
Yes, there's also like.
So go look back, see if you have some of the one of the carbon steel guys.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll double check.
All right, Rachel may be seeing you or not today. Okay. All right. Thanks, Floyd. Okay. Oh, and then the latest word this morning is we still, though we've tried to order the chairside instructor books, that the ADA is not accepting that we're a dental school and need the lower price. So he said he's going to do a new purchase order and try again. Okay, and syringes, I don't know. Okay, so let's talk charting restorations and conditions. So that is the big push for today. So this morning we are going to talk about how you do it on paper. There are still some places that use paper. Hardly any, but there's still a few. Then we're going to talk about how to do it in Axiom in our particular charting system. When I'm going to pay for the walking around this much later. Got to glue myself to the chair. Sorry to be boring. We're going to talk about our particular charting system this afternoon. In lab, you're going to have a hands-on thing with that to be able to have an idea of what's going on in the patient's chart, or to be able to make notes if you need to of charting of their existing conditions. I'm going to talk about, as I say, paper this morning, and I'm going to hand out the homework assignment that will be due next week. And then once I have that graded, then you can start doing the competency. Okay? The Axiom thing, mostly the dental students do charting existing, but it's something you should be able to do. And also you should be able to read what's in the chart or know where to look it up. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for your welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. So, I know it feels like calamity now. It's going to get better, I promise. Not for a while, but it will get better. Lo, though I walk through the valley of death. Okay. Okay, so we're going to try to help you learn how to identify the various restorative materials and their uses. So in your brain, you're going to go back to what class? Use your skills and knowledge that you were.
Radiology?
Radiology, right? So we're going to pull together the visual and the radiographic information to be able to understand what's going on with this. Identify different oral conditions such as caries, recognize and explain the color indicators and identify charting symbols. And then you're going to chart some existing restorations and restorative needs in Axiom and in traditional paper charting. So why are we charting? Obviously, we have to document our clinical findings. So A, let's find out where the cavities are so we can fix them. B, we need to know what the patient came in looking like because we're going to have a baseline. Are we getting better or worse? Right? Is this decay progressing or not? Is it something we can remineralize, or do we now need to restore it? Absolutely going to assist in patient education. You are going to do this very detailed, thorough exam that's taken you and your partners, 2 quarters. For instance, you're going to be able to then synthesize, assess all that information, and present all that information using every single aid you have. X-rays, pictures, if you ever get your chairside educators, and your knowledge, draw some pictures yourself, use some, the patient mirror and a hand mirror with them, whatever it takes to explain to them what's happening in their mouth and to help them understand how to take care of themselves. Absolutely is an aid in treatment planning. We've got to know what we're doing. We have to have that whole picture so we know what we're doing as far as treatment. And evidence in lawsuits. So, married to the plaintiff's personal injury attorney, right? So, occasionally he'll say, yes, I am an ambulance chaser. He does less of that now because now he's an appellate specialist. But he has had dental cases. I'm his dental consultant, right? He's only had a few that were like, oh yes, sad to say that's not good. You should probably sue that person. But charting is a huge deal. So, 2 things. Chart really accurately. 3 things. Chart really accurately, really inform the patient what's happening, risks and benefits. And then keep talking to them if something doesn't go well. Because guess what? If something doesn't go well, and you explain that it potentially could not go well, and you keep talking to them, and you're nice to them when things don't go well, instead of just never answering their phone calls anymore, people don't sue you. Just a little, food for thought. Treat them like human beings, help them understand you're a human being, do your utmost best for them, and communication. But if they have a really bummer restoration or condition in their mouth that they came in with, then we would like to have that charted because we can say, guess what? They showed up at our place looking like that, and here's our charting to show you that. Okay, so you may, as the subsequent provider of care, be called to testify about conditions. So please chart everything. So we already know a lot about the periodontal charting. We're used to the numbers now, and mobility, recession, cal, pocket depths, right? Looking at all the different things, the periodontal parameters. We need to now add the restorative things in. So we are going to go ahead and learn what all of these symbols mean so that you can, at a pretty easy glance, take a look at this and understand what is happening with this patient. And absolutely, this is really helpful for educating the patient. You're going to have to obviously explain to them in relationship with some radiographic pictures and intraoral photos usually, but you can talk to them about the fact that, wow, look at all this restorative that you have had, and oh, danger, caries. What's your caries risk? Yes?
Are we going to be doing this on accident?
Yes.
Okay, so...
That's lab this afternoon.
Oh, okay. So
you were checked out there for a couple of minutes.
So we're not going to write it down as like a homework assignment or anything? Oh, never mind. Never mind.
You're back with me. Oh wait, good, okay. All right, so we're using symbols just like we are for charting perio, where we have specific categories that are standardized, and we say Roman numerals for some and numbers for others. We're going to be using the same thing. We have very specific, standardized ways of charting this so that it is understandable across the dental community pretty well. So, here's our code. Blue, healthy stuff. We're good. We're all right with this happening. Existing restorations that are in good condition. That's all good. We have this existing restoration. Red, abnormal pathological things. And so also things that are pathological as in caries or fractures. So we're going to think about, gosh, what does this red circle at the end of the root mean? Oh, that means they have an endodontic lesion. They have an abscess at the end of that root. So anything that's red is something that's a concern, just like we do red for bleeding and red for pockets that are 4s and above if you're doing the paper chart. Okay? So, intraoral imaging in films. That's going to happen at the initial visit with a new patient, unless we can get
Bless you.
previously existing. Bless you. We always want current images. Why? Documentation, right? X-ray vision. Need to use our superpowers to be able to see what's happening. You've got to correlate anything you're seeing clinically with the radiographs. Always, always. I always talk about look before you leap. Look at the x-rays first if you can, because you'll have a good idea of what you're getting into, right? So if you see on your radiographs, and we'll start this afternoon, that I have forms for you to fill out to prepare yourself for tomorrow's patient. You're going to look at their radiographs today and have a good idea of what you're getting into tomorrow. Forewarned is forearmed, right? And you're going to make notes about that. We're going to know how to have a better idea of how to approach that patient and what our initial concerns are going to be. So you've got to have some good intraoral imaging and films, if at all possible. And if they don't have them, we're going to take them. Okay, into the nitty-gritty. Missing teeth. So we are going to, on this chart, just take some diagonal lines, and it's something that's missing. It's already happened, so we're going to do blue lines for this. And we're going to draw across the tooth and indicate that that tooth is gone. And then it's really helpful to do this in the periodontal boxes. Why? So you don't mix up the teeth as you're going 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, 2, 4, 5, 6, right? So that you know that you're missing that box. So if somebody's assisting you, you figured out that the important thing was please tell them what teeth are there and not first, right? So that you don't go charging along and have to fix stuff. So if all the teeth are missing, then we're going to do a little different. We're going to just do a big cross mark across the whole thing. And this is teeth that aren't replaced. Just cross them all out. All right. Amalgams. So these are class what amalgams?
1 and 2.
So there's a 2. This one actually has a little distal box form. There's a 2. This is a 2. Right. This one's actually a little amalgam crown. We don't do these much anymore. This would be a temporary kind of thing to be able to get that, just get the decay out and get it ready for a restoration. All right. This little guy would be a 1. This would be a little lingual pit. Okay, so amalgams. Clinically, it's going to be that silver color. Occasionally, there are some that are high copper content. Most of those patients are no longer with us because that happened a long time ago. But occasionally, you'll find one that's high copper that looks a little more gold, but it's still going to look different from entirely gold. And radiographically, you know that it's radiopaque, right? So you're going to correlate what does it look like on the radiograph, looks like a class 1 to me, with what's in the mouth, looks like a class 1. So that would be charted as a big occlusal. All right, you are going to really assess what's in the mouth when you're doing this on a patient who has, who's there present. And you're going to correlate what exactly is the outline of this, because on the paper chart, you're going to draw exactly what it looks like. So if it's a ginormous one, you're going to draw the ginormous existing one. If it is tiny, tiny, make it look tiny, tiny, and cover the exact surfaces that are in there. So on your chart of existing, I'm going to see differences between different class 1 amalgams. Okay? Here's one that we have the buccal groove was decayed. Here's an amalgam that is in a little amalgam crown, and what do you know? We replaced the mesiobuccal cusp with that. But you want to use your mirror on all the surfaces and be able to tell exactly what it looks like, and you're going to chart exactly what it looks like. Solid blue. Composites. So, helps if you use air. These aren't really perfect, but you can see a little color change here. Here's one that's really bad. Time to change that for sure. Here's one. Couple, if you look from the lingual, here are some composites on this guy. Here was a little lingual pit. Here is a mesial, occlusal, buccal guy. Here's a class 5 on the facial of this canine. So you're going to look really cautiously, use good air across there to see them. It's helpful if they're not really good. So the patients will say that it's a white filling, or it's this non-metallic tooth colored, so they're resin, or they're glass ionomer. They may say it's a bonded kind of restoration. And sometimes we'll actually use composites to do just cosmetic things. I think Dr. Moretta told about, maybe it was only to a few people, talked about he had little composites to close his diastema between 8 and 9. The newer ones look opaque radiographically, but the older ones actually are radiolucent. So the big challenge is this a cavity or is this a filling? So how do you tell?
You touch it.
You look in the mouth, right? If there's a hole, there's a hole. If there's a filling, there's a filling. What's another way to do that if you're just doing a radiographic evaluation? What would decay look like compared to a prepared restoration? Irregular border if it's caries. Hopefully the person holding the handpiece could do a really nice regular border, and it's going to look human crafted rather than moth-eaten and yucky. All right, so comparison between amalgam and composite. Look at the difference in density, right? Because the amalgam is metal, even though we put a radiopaking agent into the composite, it's not as dense as that metal filling, and so it's going to look a little different. All right, so we're going to outline the shape of the restoration in blue. So remember, amalgam was solid blue. Composites or porcelain also are going to be an outline of blue. And again, you're going to make it look just like it is on the surface. Porcelain. All right, some crowns these days are actually solid porcelain, or solid composite, and they're milled. But still, many of the crowns you're going to see are porcelain fused to metal, or PFM, porcelain fused to metal. So when you're looking at these guys, you are going to see a difference between the metal kind of thimble that's inside that fits over the prepared surface of the tooth, and then the porcelain, which is bonded or fused to it in the kiln. And so make sure that you are assessing those, and you're going to try to assess exactly what it looks like. So when you look at these guys that are porcelain, you're going to say, gosh, that whole surface is porcelain. The occlusal's porcelain, the facial, and the lingual, everything's porcelain. So remember, you're going to look and see the difference radiographically. The ceramic is glass-based, alumina-based, zirconia-based. The porcelain is a ceramic fired at a really high temperature. And so, as I say, it's going to be porcelain fused to metal or composite, and then the flowable and packable, there are different kinds available, but it's going to have a radiopaking agent in it. So you're going to make sure that you know the difference. And you're going to make sure that when you draw these, sorry, I needed to add another picture in here. Let me go back. Thought I had gotten one. I probably have one in the future, but let me just address it right now. So if you have porcelain fused to metal, so 8, 9, 10. Everybody look up at my screen for a minute. So these are porcelain on the facial. They're porcelain on the incisal. And then look right here at the lingual. What do you see? Hatch marks. So that's actually going to be the metal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so some anterior crowns will be metal on that whole lingual because we're trying not to have attrition on the opposing teeth. They may have a facial that is partially metal. They may have a facial that is full metal. So we're going to be really conscious of looking in the mouth. What does that guy actually look like, so that you can chart it correctly?
On the porcelain one, there was one that had it almost looked like an implant resting in it, but the other one's didn't. You said they were all course of 8, 9, and 10, but
Yeah.
one almost looked like it had an implant.
So we'll talk about the difference in charting those guys.
Oh,
Okay, so let me get back to where I was. Sorry, I did not have that picture right near this. Okay, sealants. So what do sealants look like? They're a flowable plastic material. They don't always, but more and more, they do have some radiopaque material in them. But this is just, we're going to seal the pits and grooves. So it's just going to be over the surface of the tooth. You usually can't see them radiographically though. Mostly it's going to be that they have some color in there. So we're going to find these clinically. So when you look in here, you can see these were very deep stained pits. Typically, the sealant these days has a little bit of a white appearance to it. So you'll see, oh, it looks extra white in the little pit or fissure. That's a little weird. When you run your Explorer across this, because this is going to be filling up the pits and fissures, what's that going to feel like?
Smooth.
It's going to feel smooth, right? So it won't feel like the regular groove of the tooth. So this is, if you're quite darn sure it's a sealant, you can confirm this would be something you could gently use an Explorer on to be able to say, oh, how's that? Yeah, oh, I see. It's nice and slick right there. That's a sealant. I need to chart that. And this is more typically what we see now, which is the really white material. So you'll be able to discern that visually. For these guys, we're going to put a little S on the tooth. It's going to be super tooth, right? So blue, and it's just going to tell you there's a sealant on that surface.
They clean the surface and then they put the white on it?
Yeah, so if it's very, very stained, and you guys will learn how to do this, you can clean it out with an air polisher. So if this is one reason you could use an Explorer. If it's quite firm, you've confirmed radiographically and with a dull probe that it's not cavitated, it's just stained, you could gently use an Explorer to clean the gunk out of here. But we're also going to actually train you how to use an air polisher to clean those guys out. All right, so a blue sealant. All right, so what's the difference then between a composite restoration and a composite sealant?
Are they two different type of material?
Going to be similar materials.
It's more raised.
Well, the piece of pictures are all.
So it's going to be more invasive, right? We're not going to do a sealant on caries. So if we had to prep the tooth and cut out caries, then we're usually doing a composite. If we have to cut down into the tooth, all bets are off, right? It's going to look different because it's going to cover more surface. You'll be able to see that they had to remove some. You'll likely be able to see on the x-rays especially, they had to remove some material of the tooth to be able to put in the composite. And so it's not going to be a little skinny. So I can't remember who says, make sure it's not a lake when you're done. It's like a little river or creek.
Do they eventually just wear down on its own?
They do tend to wear down. So if it looks like this, not a sealant, this is a composite, right? If it's looking like that, that's a sealant. Okay, so did my boss kind of fire me from doing sealants? Yeah, you go root plane because you're not great at this. Sorry, not a huge skill of mine. I didn't do them that often. Mine looked like lakes. Right, and so when we first had them, they weren't filled material, and the kid would just wear them down after a few days. So it was not a big deal. But now so he would have to adjust them because they were filled. Yeah, you go root plate some more, Trish. Okay. Okay, so when you're looking, you're going to. This is again when you might be able to gently do a little Explorer across the surface. Composites tend to be a little bit different feel than the enamel. And so you may have a little bit of a drag to it, but they're very hard. So, you know how when you sharpen your instrument, there's a gray line on your stone? Guess what? You might get a little gray line across there that it's picking up little metal fragments from the end of the Explorer. So don't go across the surface. You just run across and go, oh, it's a composite. Just stop now. And then absolutely air. Drying the tooth out will really help you see those guys. And it might look a little chalky if it's not really polished well anymore. Brand new ones should be almost impossible to see. So tactile detection, air, there might be a difference in sound, and a composite will cover the whole surface of an area, and a sealant will just be the little pits and fissures, the grooves or the pits. Okay, so here's one of our little customers, right? So, this is what kind of caries?
Childhood.
Early childhood caries, right? So these permanent teeth are coming in. I have concerns already about the permanent teeth, right? And they've lost some teeth because, so we have a little removable space maintainer. So we in the past have done stainless steel crowns. Mostly they'll do a composite little guy these days because these are not pretty, right? No one needs to look like a Bond villain. But in the past we did these, and you'll still occasionally see them in kids. So they're a preformed little crown, and they cut the edge to make it fit onto the tooth. You'll do this in dental materials, put cement in there after they've removed the caries, pop these guys on, and we're trying to preserve the space for the permanent tooth to come in.
Are they cheaper than a regular filling? Because you...
So they're still technique, but they are less expensive than, in some ways, than doing regular filling. And mostly this in the past was when we didn't have great composites. It was hard to get the composite to stick on dentin, and it was hard to get it to stick on primary teeth. We're better at the composite thing now. Class 2 amalgam, class 2 or 3 amalgam. All right, so now we're going to say SS for stainless steel, right? And it's not solid. It's, you know, it's really heavy-duty aluminum foil. Sorry. Never mind, that's a temporary, my mind went off the track. It's stainless steel, it's thinner. When I was a kid and I bashed up number 8, and I have an appointment now to fix 8 before pinning, I will not look snaggly toothed anymore, I'm very excited. I had a stainless steel crown on my front tooth. Super aesthetic, right? So they did a little window, they cut it out so you could mostly see the filling material. Okay, so it was mostly white. So we're going to be able to see a difference in, and again, I got to get you another picture. There's a difference in density. So stainless steel crowns, because they're a little shell. How radiopaque do you think those guys are?
Like very.
Compared to a full metal crown.
Well, no. They're still radio.
So they're kind of medium opaque. So it's more opaque than composite or porcelain, right? And it doesn't look like composite or porcelain, but it's going to be less opaque than a full metal crown. And I will find you a radiograph picture. And get those posted for you in the next couple days here. So, stainless steel, got to mark that on the lingual, on the anteriors, and on the occlusal if we're in the posteriors. All right, gold. This is also going to be really radiopaque. Inlays are restorations that just go in the valleys. Okay, so we're just replacing the pits and fissures kind of thing. You have to cut these so that they will fit straight down into the tooth and they are cemented in. Gold foils were just little pieces of gold that you actually use a tiny mini jackhammer, and you jackhammer them into the tooth. And the joke was you might as well bill the patient for the root canal when you bill them for the gold foil. This is challenging because you heat the gold up too to make it stick together. So not molten, but it was challenging. So an inlay is just going to be between the cusps. So an onlay is one that is going to replace a cusp. So here's a little inlay here. And then they replaced this whole cusp here with this whole area with an onlay that comes along here. Since it's brand new, these guys are a little hard to see. It's better, I think, on your PowerPoint that you can download there. So, again, we're going to think about what exactly does this look like in the mouth. So if it's an inlay, I'm going to expect it's going to not cover cusp, but if it's an onlay, I'm going to expect it will be drawn to cover the cusp that it's replacing, right? But not any other cusps. You're going to be really specific about which cusp. So this class 5 would maybe be more likely to be gold foil. We still have patients running around that have those in their mouths. They also were sometimes on anteriors, more from the lingual. So anytime it's gold or something that's solid metal, it's going to be the crosshatch blue. So, oh my gosh, it's hard to find people that do these anymore. But you'll notice that hygienists often have gold crowns because we've seen them 30 years old and they're still plugging along, versus some of the porcelain fused to metal that tend to fail more quickly. So here's a full gold crown. Here's a full gold crown. What's this one? Onlay. What's that guy? Inlay, right? So here's another picture of an onlay full gold crown, right? These should be going sometime in the next few years. What's this guy? Porcelain fused to metal, and the porcelain goes all the way across, right? It's on the lingual, it's on the occlusal. How about this guy? PFM, and we're going to draw that so that the lingual surface and about 2/3 of the occlusal is metal, and the rest is going to be circled for porcelain.
The porcelain fused to metal one, it just looks like porcelain on the bottom. The next one down. Yeah. That's a porcelain crown, or that's porcelain fused to metal?
I'm going to say porcelain fused to metal because I can see the little gray edge right there.
Okay.
And radiographically, you'd be able to see the metal too. Are you awake? Okay, so a full gold or semi-precious metal crown. So depends on the price of gold. For a while we did semi-precious crowns. We still do semi-precious sometimes. They're less expensive than full gold, than precious metal. If you're doing a full gold crown that's precious metal, it tends to be the yellow gold. If you're doing semi-precious, it's going to be silver colored. So you've got to be able to make sure that you know the difference between the stainless steel crown and the semi-precious, silver colored guys. So here's a full gold crown. Here's an onlay kind of deal. But also sometimes we do what's called a 3/4 crown. So everybody look up at my picture again. So number 2 and 3, the facial surfaces are not fully restored. Why? Why might that be a good deal? Aesthetics. So they can come along and they're going to restore the marginal ridge, because that's going to protect that from forces of biting. And we would have had to replace those cusps in this case, so we want to make sure that's really strong and protected. But then we're going to leave some enamel on the facial surface of the tooth, so when the patient's mouth, they have that, okay, there's a little gold, but it's not this full-on gold crown in their smile. So that is one of the options with these guys. And so again, you're going to look at all those surfaces, which ones are restored. So here's a porcelain occlusal, here's a metal occlusal, right? Back here when we're more concerned about the occlusal forces and making sure that this isn't too abrasive to the other teeth, we're using occlusals that are metal. Up here where the patient's going to smile and talk, and we're more concerned about aesthetics, we put a porcelain occlusal, right? So that's one of the reasons for these guys. But that metal occlusal tends to be easier to make sure that it stays functional for a long time, less likely to, with a porcelain crown that needs more processing, to have a margin that might open up, and it's easier on the opposing teeth. So again, PFM, here's the charting I have to, so I'm going to have to rearrange that. That didn't make a whole lot of sense, but here's your picture then. So here's the PFM, and here's where, oh my gosh, what do you know, buckle. We were able to do a nice porcelain surface, but we wanted to protect the occlusion, and so we have metal on the inside, and these guys are the same as that previous picture. This has the occlusal that's porcelain. So ceramic crowns and ceramic veneers. If it's a whole ceramic crown, we're going to do a blue line across the whole thing, because it's covering all the surfaces. If it's a veneer, it's just like a little false fingernail, just on the facial, and that's what we're going to circle, is just the facial. So if it's a facial veneer, don't send me a picture that looks like that. That looks like this. I'm starting to lose my battery. Don't send me this. Make sure that if it's a veneer, you're showing that it's just the facial. And again, you're going to confirm by looking in the patient's mouth. Is that a crown or a veneer? So, veneers can be two things. They can be the porcelain. It's a thin layer of material, like say it's like a little false fingernail. You can use it to cover up things like the staining from fluorosis. You can use it to cover up things like when my kid, went into the coffee table and she had some spots on her teeth of hypocalcification. But it can be either composite resin, which we do chairside, where they just put the composite over the facial surface of the tooth and bond it, or it can be porcelain, where they take an impression and they actually make it in the lab. So it's going to appear opaque radiographically. It's not going to be as opaque as metal. But be clear about which it is, because we're going to treat them basically the same, but they are going to be monitored a little differently. The veneer that's porcelain can get a little leakage around the edge of it and can start getting caries underneath it. All right, crowns. So we also now do CEREC crowns is one of the brands, and so we actually do a digital scan of the tooth, and then the crown is milled. It takes 5 minutes or less usually. I watched my online being milled. It was really interesting. And the nice thing is I didn't have to have a temporary. They just did it and milled it and cemented and done. So for patients especially who have an anterior crown, you don't have to walk around with a goofy looking temporary for a couple of weeks while the lab does your porcelain fused to metal. Very, very technique sensitive, takes a while. So this is a little, this was the super blood wolf whatever moon that we had at the beginning of the year.
Oh.
Right? So a little picture of Santa Cruz. Right? So here we are. This is out near Pleasure Point where the surfers have a lot of their competitions. And so here we are actually walking on the seabed because it was a king tide. It was way, way, way out. It was amazing. It was very cool. Sorry, it's not a great picture. So if you turn around from this picture and you go about 1.5 miles that way, that's where the trailer is. So let's see. And and I often think, okay, even if my day here at the dental school is going badly, right? There's nature and creation and the things God made for us, and it's going to be okay in the end. Right? We're going to get through this. Okay. So, gold or non-precious, or sorry, that would be semi-precious, fixed partial dentures. So this is your bridge. So what do you know? We're going to chart this like we do. It's going to be a combo of the missing tooth and the things we just talked about with the porcelain fused to metal, the full gold crowns. Same idea. So the abutments, it's like a bridge abutment, right? So you got to have two places to hang the bridge. And then the middle is the pontic. So if you think of pontoon bridge, it's the pontic in between. So we're going to do two things. We're going to do our diagonal lines through the missing teeth. Okay, so look at those carefully, especially if the patient has radiographs so that you're not probing the pontic. You'll do it at least once in your life. And you figure that, oh, look before you leave. Know which are teeth and which are not teeth. If you're having trouble deciding which are teeth and which are pontics, look from the lingual. That's easier to see usually. And we're going to then draw two horizontal lines on all of the teeth in the bridge, so you know which are connected. Right? So you're not going to fuss at the patient about how they're going to floss between 21 and 20. Right? Why? Because they can't, right? So bridge threader or something else. And then we're going to look at that restoration very critically and decide what surfaces are restored and replicate that in your drawing. So what do you see here? It's a little three-quarters crown, right, that the enamel's still there. Three-quarter looking crown here. This one will have some resin or porcelain there. And so we're going to see that we're actually looking at not just full crowns. Okay. So, sometimes we'll do this now with all ceramic or PFM, usually PFM because you need the metal for the strength on a bridge. So here's the missing tooth. Fortunately, we're not too super erupted here and we're not tilted too far. Here's, they've prepped the two abutment teeth. This is why it's really nice to do an implant if you can, because look how we had to take all the enamel off, turn them into little thimble guys. And they took the impression, I can see the impression material up here. And now they've constructed this porcelain fused to metal bridge. I can see that slight little gray edge of the metal there and cemented that. So that's what this is going to look like, is the facials that are porcelain. So again, 2 horizontal blue lines. Make sure that you have metal where it's metal and porcelain where it's porcelain.
And the line without, running through it is because it's the missing piece?
Yes.
And you still mark though that it's ceramic.
Yes, because you're still going to note the restorative material on the pontic part, right? So the tooth itself is gone, but we want to know what that pontic looks like. Make sense? Okay. All right. And then remember we talked about Maryland bridges. And so this would be a Maryland bridge. You're not going to usually see these anymore. Because we, rather than cut down these 2 teeth, we would just do an implant there usually. But this would be an option of a more minimal restoration. And you can see this is a couple of inlays that's attached to the pontic. And this is cemented in.
Is it called a Maryland?
Maryland Bridge.
I thought it was like Maryland, like
Maryland Monroe? No. Maryland like the state.
Oh.
Okay? Maryland, like the state. I'm thinking of dental school in Maryland. Right. So. All right. So, oh my gosh, we're missing enough teeth. We don't have the money or the whatever for implants, the oomph. Here is a removable partial denture. Now, what cleaning agent could you not use on this guy? Anything with bleach, right? So now we're going to say, okay, not a fixed partial denture where we're doing these little lines across. Not that. The 2 lines for the fixed partial denture. Now we're doing the removable partial denture. Oh, and here's, remember we talked about the flipper, the little stay plate. So here's somebody that has had an accident. That's right after the accident. We took care of the root out of there. And they've taken an impression and made this like a retainer. It's not the most beautiful tooth, but they've taken a denture tooth and put it on there to be able to give them something to not look horrible while that's healing up, so that hopefully we can do an awesome implant later. Right, so if the patient's smile line isn't really high, it's going to look pretty credible, right? But this is a temporary thing because we're waiting to be able to do a final restoration there. So here's how that looks. So again, we're marking off the missing teeth, but now how many lines are we doing? And what was the fixed partial denture? Right, 2 lines for fixed, 3 for removable. Okay, and it's just going to be across the teeth that are actually replaced by the partial. All right, full denture. Oh, aren't you so glad this has not happened to you? So here's the ridge, and then here's the denture in there, and you can see, oh, this poor person, let's make room for this frenum, right? They have the little cutout for the frenum. That's normal.
Stretch it up? Yeah.
Oh, they're just showing how it fits in there, yeah. So you do have to make a cutout, and then the base is thick enough to restore what would be the dimension of the alveolar bone, and the teeth are kind of sitting on top. They're just partially embedded in there. All right, and we're just going to do, because we did the big X if it's not replaced, but now we're just doing the line across for the complete denture. So that means a combination of these teeth are no longer there, but we have a full denture. The other one, don't be knocking things out over there. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing you'll see besides CD, which is complete denture, is FUD, full upper denture. FUD, what does FUD mean? Fuddy-duddy, it's a full upper denture. Okay. Root canal and final restoration. So, root canal, this is just the gutta percha filling and a little bit of filling cement down here. What does this look like? There's a post. So there's the post and core, and then this is just the root canal material. So those guys are going to be, this is just root canal material. If this was thicker, we would say, oh, that's a post. And then you're also going to chart what's on the surface above it. So here's the post and core. So it's got a post, core, and crown on these teeth. That they've used these, they've been cast gold, they've been pre-cast. They mostly, if they have to do a pre-cast one, goes partway into the root canal part, and then the core sticks up so that the crown has something better to hang on to. So on the facial surface, you're going to put the line of the gutta percha, and then you're also going to do the posts like this, and then you're going to do the restoration on top. Implant, here's your implant. So the implant then is going to be a crosshatch. So the post was solid. Everybody look at this for a sec. Post is solid, right? Solid metal. But the implant, we're actually going to differentiate by making it thicker. It looks more like the implant, and it's going to be crosshatched. And that'll tell you the difference between those. And then again, you're going to do the restoration on top. Diastema, pretty easy. A couple of red lines and the millimeters apart that the teeth are. Impacted tooth, we're going to, sorry, ignore 13. So 16 on this picture is fully impacted. 15, the mesial surface is sticking out part way. It's partially impacted or partially erupted. So you have to be real specific. So if only the mesial buccal cusp is erupted, then you're going to circle everything but the mesial buccal cusp. And so that would be on the facial and the occlusal, but then this lingual would be all covered. Make sense? All right. Rotation, super eruption, mesial tilt. We're going to do arrows. Just show me the direction that the tooth went. Periapical lesions, look at the radiographs, figure out how that thing looks replicated on the actual root where it is happening, or roots, and the shape and size of the lesion. All right, caries. If we see these radiographically, then we are going to note them in a particular way, and that is going to be on the facial. So if you were dental students, you'd be assessing what they look like as far as enamel or dentin. But you're just going to put a note facially, and caries is solid red. And again, it's going to look like, if you're doing occlusal, it should replicate what you're seeing on the occlusal. So primary or initial lesions that you look at in the mouth, then same deal, make it look like it is in the mouth. Okay? So if it's little tiny, that's going to be one thing. What's this tooth going to look like?
Almost gone.
That whole crown is gone. You're just going to be able to look kind of into the gum tissue and see the little stumpy root. Secondary or recurrent caries. You're going to chart the restoration, and then you're going to put a red mark next to it. And again, it's going to correlate with where you're seeing the decay. Right, so what kind of restoration is this guy on 3?
Recurrent.
Recurrent, but what's the restoration?
Amalgam.
An amalgam, right, class 5 amalgam. And on the mesial surface of that, there's new caries. Look a little recurrent caries around the margin of number 5, the MO, class 2 amalgam. So you're going to figure out the same thing with defective margins as well. So we have a composite. It's starting to break down around the edges. This amalgam, not good. So now, same thing, we're going to do that defective margin in red. Abrasion or abfraction. I personally think these are both abrasion. If you're more V-shaped and it's starting to undermine the enamel, people think that's abfraction. You can sometimes kind of see the stripes of the toothbrush going across the abrasion.
So they're abrasions?
Those guys, I would say abrasion, maybe that guy abfraction. So when we're charting those, we're going to put a red circle. Fractured teeth, we're going to put a red circle.
I think we have to go.
Yes, you do. So abfraction or abrasion, sorry, I have these in the wrong order. Solid red. Overhangs, you're going to go ahead and put in your little triangles.
I have a question on overhangs.
And then we're good. All right. Overhangs.
So in clinic, if we detect overhang, do we leave it alone or try to shape it?
You're going to leave it alone for now. We're going to talk about removing them later. Thank you for your patience. Today, if you're missing anything, figure it out today.
I'm gonna skip today.